The Lost Motorcycle Club is one of the first gangs you run into in GTA 5, and things get violent almost immediately. They're a dirty, violent biker gang based out of Blaine County, and right from the start, Trevor wants them wiped out. These guys run drugs and guns, ride in formation, and carry a reputation built on chaos. After peaking in Liberty City around 2008, their Blaine County chapter had full control of Stab City and ran operations across the state. But crossing Trevor is exactly what causes their downfall. On September 17, 2013, players saw Trevor Phillips murder their president, Johnny Klebitz, with a single stomp to the skull. From there, Trevor drives straight to Stab City and blows up their trailers one by one, killing anyone who gets in the way. That moment pretty much marks the end of the Lost dominance in Blaine County. In later missions like Nervous Ron, some members try to fight back and chase him down, but it's too late. Trevor dismantles everything, their business, their bikes, their leadership, all gone in a matter of days. The few that survive are barely holding on, mostly seen drifting around East Vinewood or the county roads. The gang weren't just about leather and bikes, they had real muscle behind their name. They ran weapons between Sandy Shores and the Alamo Sea, used trailers as labs and safe houses, and kept things running through patched-in members from other states. But without a leader, and with no one left to organize, the whole operation just collapsed. They really picked the wrong guy to mess with, and it cost them everything. The Marabunta Grande isn't loud like the Ballas or flashy like the Vagos, but in GTA 5, they're just as dangerous. They're a Salvadoran street gang with a reputation built on smuggling and enforcement. You'll mostly find them holding down El Burro Heights and moving through Vespucci, and once they've claimed a spot, they don't just let it go that easily. Anyone who crosses into their space usually gets pushed out or doesn't walk away at all. By 2013, their conflict with the Aztecas over Blaine County's drug routes was already underway. These aren't small-time scuffles either. Trevor finds himself right in the middle of it. Even though they only appear in one main story mission, you run into them during Trevor's side jobs and smuggling runs. Whether it's boats off the coast or trucks on back roads, there's always something moving, and they're usually the ones moving it. Later on, Trevor starts hitting those operations directly. In one mission, you're taking out smugglers from the hilltops. In another, you're chasing down vehicles packed with products. It's not always spelled out, but the way these jobs are structured, it's clear Marabunta's supply chain is being picked apart piece by piece. And honestly, they can't keep up. What makes them stand out isn't big gunfights or block takeovers, it's how quiet they are about keeping their business running. You'll spot their members near warehouses and construction zones, not drawing attention, but always watching. They don't brag, they don't show off, and they're not interested in looking like a threat. But when someone disrupts their route, they stand on business. The Varios Los Aztecas are a Mexican-American street gang based in Northeast Rancho and around the Alamo Sea. They wear turquoise and white, and for years they've moved drugs, held turf, and maintained steady influence across their part of Los Santos. In GTA 5, they shift focus toward Blaine County, going after smuggling routes already controlled by Marabunta Grande, and that's when things start getting out of hand. By 2013, they're locked in a back and forth with Marabunta, each side trying to secure control over desert drug routes. The Aztecas have cartel ties, solid manpower, and a reputation that still holds weight in the city. But once the Triads cut Trevor Phillips out of a deal and start working with the Aztecas instead, things changed fast. Trevor doesn't just back off, he takes it personally. First, he targets one of their operations in East Los Santos, leading to destruction of their setup. Then, he starts hitting their runners, intercepting shipments and shutting down operations, one move after another. You see the fallout in missions where the Aztecas show up as backup muscle, or low-level lackeys. They're armed, aggressive, and still loyal to their name. But by that point, they're already losing control. Every time they try to push into Blaine County, Trevor's already one step ahead. They had numbers, resources, and a clear plan to expand, but once Trevor stepped in, everything started falling apart. Their shipments vanished, their routes broke down, and the hold they were trying to build just didn't last. In the end, the Aztecas came in ready for business, but they crossed the wrong guy, and it cost them the whole operation. The Los Santos Triads are a Chinese crime syndicate operating mainly out of Cypress Flats. They're structured, well-connected, and unlike most street gangs in the city, they don't advertise what they do. Most of their work stays under the radar, drug trafficking, high-level deals, and they usually keep a layer of distance between themselves and whoever's pulling the trigger. But in GTA 5, everything changes, and it all starts with Trevor. Around 2013, the Triads had expanded from Hong Kong into Los Santos, building out connections in the industrial areas and slowly aligning themselves with other criminal networks. At first, they try to work with Trevor through Chef and his meth lab lab in Sandy Shores. But once they realize Trevor's unpredictable and volatile, they cut him out and move toward the Aztecas instead. That decision sets everything off. Trevor doesn't take it lightly. After hearing about the shift, he starts attacking their operation piece by piece. He burns their shipments, kills key members, and makes sure they know exactly who they're dealing with. Then, in North Yankton, things explode. The Triads kidnap Michael and fly him across the country, forcing Trevor and Franklin into a shootout in the middle of a snowy graveyard just to get him back. That says a lot, as it shows how far the conflict's gone and how deep the Triads are willing to dig in. Even after that, they still try to get control back. But later in the story, Franklin shuts it down completely. In one of the endings, he tracks down Wei Cheng, the Los Santos Triads boss, and kills him at a golf club in Pacific Bluffs. Although it's such a sudden death, that's pretty much it for Cheng. They had the structure, the money, and the muscle to build something bigger. But picking fights with all three protagonists, that's what brought them down. The Street Punks aren't a formal gang like the Ballas or the Vagos. They're an unorganized group of low-level criminals found mostly around Strawberry Davis and the Maze Bank Arena. They don't wear colors, don't follow a leader, and they're not claiming turf. Most of the time, they're just looking to rob someone, harass pedestrians, or jump into small-time crimes when they get the chance. By 2013, they're already part of the background noise in Los Santos. You come across them in missions like Chop and Hood Safari, usually showing up with cheap handguns, yelling threats, and going straight for whoever's in front of them, but now they're just sloppy and scattered around. They also appear in side events, like when Franklin passes through South LS and gets approached by random aggressors trying to pick a fight. You'll often hear them call out from sidewalks, tail certain characters, or try to jack cars in open daylight. Their behavior isn't tied to missions, it's just part of what's always happening in these neighborhoods. Outside of missions, they appear during muggings, street fights, or low-level holdups. You might see them cornering a civilian, starting a fight at a gas station, or trying to hijack a parked car. They don't work together in any meaningful way, it's just whoever's around that day trying to make something happen. They don't have rivalries or deals going on with other gangs, but they still show up when something goes wrong in the rougher parts of the city. If someone's getting jumped outside a liquor store or chased down behind an apartment complex, it's usually them. The Street Punks don't change anything in the story, and they're never treated like major players. But they still show what kind of city Los Santos really is. One where danger doesn't always come with a name. The Los Santos Vagos are one of the largest Hispanic street gangs in the city, and easily one of the most recognizable. They wear yellow, ride lowriders, and hold most of Rancho, where their presence is almost impossible to miss. Unlike some of the smaller sets scattered across Los Santos, the Vagos have numbers, firepower, and a reputation built off violence, drug pushing, and keeping outsiders off their block. Around 2013, their grip on Rancho was already well established. In GTA 5, Franklin crosses paths with them during the story mission called Repossession, where he and Lamar end up in a shootout inside a stash house. That moment shows you exactly how fast things go wrong when you're deep in Vagos turf. They're not the type to negotiate or back down, they shoot first and clean up later. You also hear about them through Gerald, who constantly points to the Vagos as a problem in the area. It's clear they've been building up behind the scenes, not just on the corners, but deeper in the drug supply chain. They don't say much, but you can tell their structure. The way they respond to threats, how quickly they show up, and the amount of firepower they bring, it all shows how serious they are about holding on to their turf. Even without a clear chain of command, it's still hard to ignore how influential their gang is. Their turf stays active throughout the story, and their role in shootouts and drug-related missions stays consistent from the moment they show up. The Vagos aren't the most complex gang in Los Santos, but they don't need to be. They're loud, territorial, and always armed. In the street-level picture of Los Santos, they've always been one of the loudest names on the board. The O'Neill brothers are a violent backwoods meth-dealing clan based out of Grapeseed. They're not a gang in the traditional sense. No colors, no crew tags, no street code, but they run their operation like one. They cook meth out of their family farmhouse, push products across Blaine County, and have deep enough ties to pull in business from outside players like the Triads. And for a while, that's all working, until they try to cut in on Trevor Phillips. In the events of 2013, during the main story of Grand Theft Auto 5, the O'Neills are already trying to expand their business. At first, they've been dealing through Trevor's lab in Sandy Shores, but after setting up meetings with the Cheng family behind his back, they try to cut him out entirely. That decision turns out to be a mistake, and a big one. Trevor doesn't warn them or even threaten them. He just drives straight to their farm and starts tearing it apart. This event happens in Crystal Maze, and it's one of the most one-sided assaults in the game. Trevor burns down their meth lab, shoots his way through the property, authority and takes out almost every O'Neil on the spot. Only one or two escape, and from that point on, they spend the rest of the story trying and failing to get back at him. Later on, Franklin gets involved when he tracks down the last of the O'Neil brothers during a mission in the woods. It's a short sequence, but it shows just how far the family is willing to go out of pride. You can tell they're not just angry, they're stubborn, holding on to whatever they've got left, even if there's no real chance of winning. The O'Neils aren't built like the city gangs. They don't have turf wars or territory maps, but in Blaine County, they were a known name. They had land, they had product, and for a while, they had real weight. But after crossing Trevor, none of that lasted. They didn't just lose the business, they lost the house, the family, and the last bit of control they ever had. The Armenian Mob is one of the first criminal groups tied into the story of GTA 5. They operate around La Puerta and run things through Simeon Yatarian's car dealership, using it as a front for vehicle scams, fake loans, and intimidation. While most gangs are fighting over corners, the Armenians stay inside the paperwork, focusing on fraud over firepower. During the early months of 2013, Franklin is still working repossession jobs under Simeon, and that's where the Armenian Mob starts showing up. In one of the first missions, Michael tricks Franklin into repossessing his son's car, which leads straight to Simeon getting thrown through a window. That moment kind of sets the tone for how they work. They're not chasing territory or picking fights in the street. They move through contracts, fake deals, and quiet threats. Simeon might be the public face, but it's clear he isn't doing it all alone. He mentions his Armenian muscle more than once, and in repossession, Franklin ends up dealing with some of them firsthand. They're not meant to be enforcers like the Balas or the Vagos, but they've got enough pull to make problems when they want to. You can tell their operation depends on staying small, keeping things legal on the surface, and pulling strings without drawing attention. Once Franklin walks away from Simeon, that's the last we really see of them. They don't come after him, don't show up again, and honestly, they just aren't built for the kind of trouble the story turns into. They don't hold territory or start shootouts, but the Armenian Mob still manages to tip the first domino. Without them, Franklin doesn't meet Michael, and without that, nothing else in the story happens. For a group that works behind the glass, they leave more impact than most crews holding guns. The Rednecks in GTA 5 are based out of Blaine County, and they're some of the most aggressive people you'll run into in the game. You'll find them in areas like Grapeseed, Sandy Shores, and along the Grand Senora Desert. They don't wear colors or roll in lowriders, but they absolutely defend what they see as theirs, and they do it with shotguns and trucks, not warnings. Around mid-2013, they're already reacting violently to anyone they don't recognize. You see it as soon as Trevor moves into Sandy Shores. Just driving around their trailers or getting too close to certain back roads is enough to trigger a fight. They're not looking to expand or move weight across the state, they're just protecting the little ground they have, and they'll fight anyone over it. You get the clearest look at them in Rampage, Rednecks, where Trevor gets called out for disrespecting their culture. It doesn't take long before they show up in groups, fully armed and ready to go after him. They take cover, push forward, and don't back off. It's messy and personal, which is exactly how they fight. They also show up outside of missions. You'll see them guarding small junkyards gathered around trailers or yelling threats from across rundown gas stations. Sometimes they're drunk, sometimes they're just angry, but they never wait for you to make a move. Once they decide you're on their land, the guns come out. They don't run an organized operation, and they're not tied to any bigger network, but that's what makes them unpredictable. They don't need money or a reason to start shooting. They just need you to be nearby. The Rednecks aren't looking to rise through the ranks or play politics. They just want things to stay how they are. But in a place like Blaine County, that's all it takes to turn them into a gang worth fearing. The Korean Mob, also known as the Kakangpai, isn't loud or flashy, but in GTA 5, they're one of the most quietly dangerous groups in the city. They're based in Little Seoul, operating out of small businesses, back rooms, and side alleys most people pass by without noticing, and that's exactly how they like it. Their money comes from loan sharking, fraud, and weapons deals, and they keep everything behind closed doors. During the events of 2013, you start to pick up on how they work. You don't hear their name in every mission, but they're there, just under the surface. Trevor mentions them while talking about rival dealers, and Little Seoul is full of areas tied to their network. They don't make headlines, but when you look at how they move, it's clear they're serious as hell. They're the kind of crew that keeps quiet until someone crosses a line. There aren't big action scenes or missions centered around them, but that doesn't mean they're missing. You can tell by the security at some stores, the high-end vehicles parked where they shouldn't be, and the way certain neighborhoods don't welcome outsiders. It's the little things that show how deep they're embedded in the area. However, these guys are not the type to cause turf wars or shoot it out in the open. They handle problems through intimidation and pressure, and if that doesn't work, they escalate carefully. Never messy, never public. That's what makes them harder to track and even harder to remove. The Korean mob doesn't fall apart by the end of the story, and they're never taken down in a single event. Instead, they're one of the few groups that just stays where they are, still operating, still connected, and still making a heck ton of money. And in a city where most gangs go out with gunfire, the Kangpai survive by doing the opposite. They keep their heads down, protect their turf, and move like a crew that knows exactly how far they can go without ever being seen. The group known as the Hippies of Blaine County is one of the strangest factions in GTA 5. They don't fight over corners, carry weapons, or run organized rackets, but they're still embedded in the game's world in their own way. You'll find them off the grid, living near the satellite dishes and the Beam Me Up art site, surrounded by trailers, painted signs, and the belief that something otherworldly is coming. It's quiet, but it leaves a hell of a mark. During the events of 2013, they've already formed a small, isolated community. Most of them are older men, former hippies, and conspiracy theorists who've abandoned city life for a different kind of structure. They don't follow a leader, but they all act on shared beliefs. And while that may not sound like much of a threat, the way they move together, how they behave around outsiders, you can basically figure out that there's something weird going on. They appear as background NPCs near the Beam Me Up site, usually when you're out in the desert. You won't see them doing anything aggressive, they just stand around, talk about aliens, or walk between the trailers and signs. There's no violence, but the scenes are strange, and the silence around them makes it even weirder. You kind of realize just how unchecked they are. What separates them from the rest is how hidden they are. While other gangs fight for recognition, this group survives by staying ignored. They're buried deep in parts of Blaine County most people don't bother to check, and because of that, they go untouched. No police, no rival crews, just rumors and strange behavior. They're never confronted, and there's no real ending to their story. They stay in their corner, repeating the same routines and waiting on something they believe is coming. You don't get a big shootout or a clean conclusion, just a group that refuses to leave. The hippies don't need weapons or territory to stay in the game. All they need is distance, and out in Blaine County, they've already got plenty of it. The Professionals are a four-man crew that specialize in high-level robberies. They don't run corners, claim neighborhoods, or get caught up in street politics. Instead, they work like a tight, efficient team, focused on precision, timing, and getting out with the money before anyone knows what happened. They don't draw attention, and honestly, they don't need to. Heading into 2013, you first hear about them indirectly during the Paleto Score, when Michael and the crew rob the bank in Paleto Bay. During the mission, a separate group of gunmen in full tactical gear ambushes the scene and opens fire. The game doesn't name them outright, but many players refer to them as the Professionals because of how clean and coordinated their approach is. That encounter ends up turning the heist into a chaotic three-way shootout. While Michael, Trevor, and Franklin are already fighting their way out, this other crew shows up with assault rifles, body armor, and zero hesitation. They don't talk, they don't stall, and they don't warn anyone. They just start shooting. What should have been a clean getaway suddenly becomes a full standoff between both crews and waves of police. What separates them from street-level gangs is how they operate. They show up with gear, tight movement, and no signs of improvising. It's obvious they've run jobs together before. No one is panicking or shouting orders. They just move, shoot, and go directly for the target. And once it's over, they don't stick around. They vanish. These guys don't care about reputation or visibility. They're not running products, pushing territory, or recruiting soldiers. Every move is planned, and every job is about one thing: profit. Because of these guys, this is the only time the protagonists are caught off guard by another team just as calculated as they are. The Altruist Cult is one of the strangest gangs in GTA 5. You won't find them in the streets or fighting over turf. Instead, they've isolated themselves in a fenced-off camp in the Chiliad Mountain State Wilderness, far from the city and deep in the hills. They don't wear colors, and they don't advertise what they do, but they're dangerous, and they quickly react to anyone who gets close enough. By 2013, the gang had already set their foot in the game. It's made up of older men who reject technology, hate outsiders, and believe the world is falling apart because of younger generations. Anyone under 30 they see as a threat. It might sound like an exaggeration, but once you cross into their land, it's clear they're serious. There are no warnings, just rifles, shouting, and gunfire. You get pulled into their world through Trevor. During certain random events, he can bring people to the cult instead of helping them. After a few deliveries, they invite him to the compound, but it's not a gesture of trust. They plan to kill him. What follows is a full shootout where Trevor fights his way through a heavily guarded camp. Inside, you find lookouts, barriers, and armed men ready to defend the property. The camp is surrounded by hand-painted signs telling outsiders to stay away, and there are broken down vehicles and makeshift defenses scattered across the area. They don't leave their territory, but anyone who enters is treated as an enemy. They aren't part of the city's power struggles, and they don't connect to the bigger storylines, but their presence still matters. The altruist cult isn't chasing influence or money, they just want isolation, and they're willing to kill to protect it. The Madrazo Cartel isn't just another gang, it's a well-funded criminal organization with real influence in Los Santos. At the top is Martin Madrazo, a powerful figure who uses wealth, legal connections, and fear to keep things under control. He lives in a gated mansion in Vinewood Hills and handles problems through lawyers when he can, and hires cold-blooded killers when he can't. Early in 2013, Michael gets on his bad side after demolishing a house that turns out to belong to Madrazo's mistress. What should have been a quiet job turns into a debt, and that debt becomes the reason Michael and Franklin pull off their first big heist, robbing a jewelry store. Right away, you see how Madrazo moves. He doesn't yell or threaten on the spot. He calmly gives you a deadline and expects you to handle it. The cartel doesn't walk around in crews or shoot it out on the streets. They keep things quiet. When Madrazo needs to make a point, he doesn't show up himself, he sends someone. But when Trevor crosses the line by kidnapping his wife, the reaction isn't delayed. Things escalate quickly, and Trevor and Michael are forced to leave town to avoid making things worse. Even then, Madrazo doesn't lose control. He stays in the background, but keeps the pressure up. You hear his name during key missions, and even when he's not in the room, his influence still affects how the crew moves. By the end of the story, the Madrazo cartel doesn't collapse or lose its footing. It keeps operating the way it always has, protected by money, covered by legal fronts, and untouched by the same fallout that takes down most of the other gangs in Los Santos. The Ballas are one of the oldest and most violent street gangs in Los Santos. Known for wearing purple and rolling through Davis and Strawberry and lowriders, they've built a name through drug dealing, weapons trafficking, and long-standing rivalries, especially with the families. In GTA 5, they're not just part of the background, they're directly tied to Franklin's story and the history of the city's gang violence. Back in the early 2013 timeline, tensions between the Ballas and the families are still running deep. The conflict dates back years, and while both groups have been weakened over time, that bad blood hasn't gone anywhere. You see it right away in missions like Hood Safari, where Franklin and Lamar try to make a drug deal with the Ballas, only to get double-crossed in a setup that turns into a shootout. It's a moment that shows the Ballas are still playing dirty, still holding grudges, and still looking for ways to gain ground. They're not just street soldiers either. You can easily tell there's solid leadership behind them, guys who plan things out, who send shooters into rival territory, and who keep the drug money flowing. Even when things go sideways, they regroup as fast as they can. Later in the story, Franklin finds himself going up against them more directly, especially when he's helping out people like Stretch, who drags him back into street politics he's trying to leave behind. The Ballas don't show up in boardrooms or clean neighborhoods. They stay on the corners, in alleyways, and inside broken down homes they've turned into safe houses. And even though the families are supposed to be the main rival, it often feels like the Ballas are the ones actually running things on the ground. The Ballas have the numbers, firepower, and the drive to turn any small fights into something bigger. By the end of the story, they're still out there. The gang isn't defeated, their turf isn't taken, and their presence in Davis remains strong. The Ballas stay exactly where they've always been, right in the middle of it all, ready to cause hellfire on whoever they want. The families are one of the most recognized street gangs in Los Santos, and they play a major role in GTA 5. They wear green, drive lowriders, and control parts of Chamberlain Hills, Strawberry, and Davis. While they've been around for decades, the version you see in this game is fractured, still alive, but far from what they used to be. In 2013, the families were still locked in a bitter war with the Ballas. It's a rivalry that's gone on for years, and even though both sides have taken losses, nothing's been settled. You see it early on when Franklin and Lamar walk into Hood Safari thinking they're setting up a clean drug deal. Instead, it's an ambush. The Ballas open fire without hesitation, and what's supposed to be business turns into another shootout. That one moment shows how deep the tension still runs. What separates the families from other gangs in the city isn't just their history, it's how disorganized they've become. Different sets operate in different ways, and hardly anyone's on the same page. Lamar wants to build street cred, Stretch is dragging in outside players for his own gain, and the rest of the crew follows whatever's in front of them. There's no central leadership holding it together, and because of that, they keep slipping behind. Franklin stays involved because of loyalty, but it's clear through the story that he's already pulled halfway out. He's doing jobs for bigger crews, sitting at different tables, and seeing how small the gang looks from the outside. He doesn't need someone to tell him it's not worth it. He sees it in every job where the families get left behind. While Lamar keeps chasing what used to matter, Franklin is already moving towards something else. Still, the families didn't disappear. They're in the background, still patrolling their blocks, still flashing green in the neighborhoods they've always claimed. But they aren't growing. They aren't gaining power, and they aren't shaping anything beyond the few streets they still walk. By the end of the game, they're still standing, but what they're standing on is thinner than ever. Their name still means something in the neighborhood, but not outside of it. The influence they had is mostly gone, and the leadership never came back. And for someone like Franklin, staying would have meant wasting every opportunity he's earned in his entire life. And if you liked this video, you'll probably like these ones as well.